Get her out of my ER. She's just a nurse. She doesn't belong here. Dr. Marcus Cole's voice cut through the entire room like a blade, loud, deliberate, designed to humiliate. Emily Walker froze in the middle of the hallway, a chart clutched to her chest, her face burning red as every single colleague turned to stare. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't flinch. He smiled. And that smile, cold, satisfied, the kind that belonged on a man who had never once been told no, made Emily's stomach drop straight to the floor. She had done nothing wrong. She had done everything right. And still he stood there, reducing her to nothing in front of everyone she worked with. If you're new here, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Now let's get into it. Emily Walker was the kind of woman people looked through, not at. She had learned to live with that. She had learned to keep her shoulders slightly hunched, her voice slightly soft, her presence slightly smaller than the room required. It was a survival skill she had picked up somewhere between her father's funeral and her first day at Mercy General Clinic on the north side of Chicago. Make yourself easy to overlook, and people won't bother finding reasons to push you down. That was the theory. The problem was some people didn't need a reason. Dr. Marcus Cole was one of those people. He was the kind of man who took up space like he owned it, tall, silver-haired, perpetually tan, in a way that suggested expensive vacations and a life uninterrupted by real consequences. He was the senior attending physician at Mercy General, which meant he ran the floor the way a king ran a court, with absolute authority and absolutely no accountability. He had a habit of singling people out, and for the last 8 months that habit had landed squarely on Emily Walker. He said that Tuesday morning, not even looking up from the tablet in his hands. "Did you administer the metoprolol to room 14 last night?" Emily straightened. "Yes, Dr. Cole. Per the order, per the order." He finally looked up, and the way his eyes moved over her was the way you'd look at something mildly inconvenient. "The order said 12.5 milligrams. You gave 25. "The order was updated at 9:17 p.m. by Dr. Reyes," Emily said carefully. "I have the timestamp in the chart." He stared at her for a long beat. Then he did something she had come to recognize as his signature move. He smiled. "Get me the chart." She handed it to him immediately because she had already pulled it, because she always came prepared, because she had learned very early on that with Dr. Cole, you either came armed or you came humiliated. He looked at it for 30 seconds. He handed it back without a word. No apology, no acknowledgement. He simply turned and walked away, already talking to someone else, as if Emily had never existed at all. She stood there holding the chart and breathed through her nose. Her coworker Priya appeared at her elbow like a ghost. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Emily said. "He does that to everyone," Priya said quietly. "Don't take it personally." "I know," Emily said, but she did take it personally. She took it very personally, because it wasn't the first time and it wasn't the second time, and at some point the accumulation of 100 small moments starts to feel like a verdict. Like the world has looked at you, considered you, and decided what you were worth. Emily Walker had been told what she was worth her entire life. She had stopped arguing with the verdict a long time ago. Her father, Chief Petty Officer James Walker, United States Navy, had died when Emily was 15. Not in combat, which would have at least given the loss a shape, a frame, something to hang grief on, but from a heart attack at the kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon, just home from his third deployment. She had been the one to find him. She had been the one to call 911. She had been the one to sit in a plastic chair in a hospital waiting room for 6 hours before a doctor came out and told her that some things can't be fixed. That was the day Emily decided she was going to be a nurse. Not a doctor, a nurse. Because in that waiting room, it hadn't been the doctor who had sat with her and brought her water and held her hand through the worst hours of her life. It had been a nurse. A tired, kind woman named Rosa who had never told Emily things were going to be fine, but had simply stayed. Emily wanted to be someone who stayed. She had worked every job she could find to put herself through nursing school. She had graduated near the top of her class. She had applied to 17 hospitals and clinics before Mercy General had said yes. And now 3 years in, she was still the nurse that nobody quite believed in, except for the patients who often requested her specifically, which was a detail that Dr. Marcus Cole had never once commented on. It was a Wednesday when Priya first mentioned the gala. "The Whitmore Foundation event," Priya said, dropping into the chair beside Emily in the break room. You've heard of it. Vaguely, Emily said. It's huge. Black tie, 300 people, a hotel ballroom the size of a football field. My cousin works catering and she got me 2 extra tickets. Priya slid a cream-colored envelope across the table. Come with me. Emily looked at the envelope like it might bite her. That's not really my scene. That's exactly why you should go, Priya said. You've been working 12-hour shifts for the last 3 weeks. You eat dinner alone in your car twice a week, and the last time you did anything that wasn't work-related, you told me you went to the grocery store and called it a nice outing. Emily opened her mouth. Don't argue with me, Priya said. Come to the gala. Wear something that isn't scrubs. Have 1 glass of wine. You don't have to talk to anyone. I hate events like that, Emily said. I know, Priya said. That's not a reason. She should have said no. She knew it even as she was saying yes. She knew it as she stood in front of her closet that Friday evening, staring at the one dress she owned that could plausibly pass for formal, a deep navy wrap dress she had bought for her nursing school graduation and never worn again. She knew it as she did her hair and applied mascara with the focus of a woman performing surgery. She knew it as she stepped out of the cab in front of the Whitmore Grand Hotel and looked up at the blazing lights and the crowd of elegant strangers streaming through the entrance doors. She absolutely should have stayed home. You look beautiful, Priya said, appearing beside her and taking her arm. I look like someone who borrowed their work-appropriate aunt's dress, Emily said. Same thing, Priya said cheerfully and pulled her inside before she could escape. The ballroom hit Emily like a physical force. She had known it would be large, but knowing and experiencing were entirely different things. It was a sea of sequins and tailored suits, champagne flutes, and old money laughter. A string quartet played something elegant in the corner. Servers moved through the crowd like fish through water, perfectly timed, perfectly polished. Emily stopped walking about 20 feet inside the door. Breathe, Priya said. I'm breathing, Emily said. You're doing the thing where you go still like a deer, Priya said. Breathe with your mouth. Emily breathed with her mouth. It didn't help much. They found a high table near the edge of the room, and Priya immediately dove into the crowd with the ease of someone born for exactly this kind of environment, leaving Emily standing alone with a glass of white wine she had collected from a passing tray and absolutely no intention of moving. That was fine. She could stand here. She could observe. She was good at observing. She had been observing the world from a safe distance her entire life. She was on her second glass of wine and had successfully avoided making eye contact with anyone for approximately 45 minutes when it happened. She reached for a water glass on a nearby tray at the same moment someone else did, and their hands collided and the glass tipped, and a small waterfall cascaded directly off the edge of the tray and onto the sleeve of the man standing beside her. Emily froze. Oh my God, she said. I'm so sorry, I didn't see. I'm so sorry. The man looked at his sleeve. Then he looked at her. He was tall, not just tall, but the kind of tall that reorganizes a room. Dark hair, a jaw that looked like it had been cut from something harder than bone, and eyes that were a color Emily could only describe as serious, a dark gray that held amusement with visible effort. He was wearing a suit that had probably cost more than Emily's monthly rent, and it was currently dripping. It's water, he said. His voice was low and calm, the voice of a man who had been in situations considerably more alarming than a wet sleeve. It's your suit, Emily said, already reaching for the cocktail napkins on the table. Here, if you blot it now before it sets. It's really fine, he said, but he didn't step away, and Emily was already patting his sleeve with the concentrated focus of someone whose entire professional existence was built on handling emergencies. I'm a nurse, she said, as if that explained the intensity with which she was blotting a man's jacket at a charity gala. I default to fixing things. I'm sorry, you can tell me to stop. There was a beat of silence. Then he said, Luke Harrison. She looked up. He had extended his hand. There was something in the steadiness of his gaze that was deeply disarming, not aggressive, not dismissive, just direct in a way that Emily wasn't used to people being with her. She shook it. Emily Walker. Emily Walker, he repeated, and the way he said it was like he was filing it somewhere. What kind of nurse? Medical surgical, at Mercy General. She paused. The clinic, not the hospital. We're smaller. And do you regularly assault the guests at charity events? Or is tonight a special occasion? Emily blinked. Then she realized he was smiling, just barely the kind of smile that lived mostly at the corners of the eyes, and something in her chest shifted the way a door shifts when the lock finally gives. She laughed. It surprised her. It surprised him too, she thought. Or maybe he simply hadn't expected it to be real, unguarded, and genuine, and a little too loud for a room where everyone was performing a more polished version of themselves. I was trying to get water, she said. In my defense. In your defense, he agreed. How's that working out? Poorly, she said. Obviously. He waved down a server and got 2 glasses of something amber whiskey. She realized real whiskey, not the decorative kind, and handed her one before she could object. I don't usually drink whiskey, she said. Neither do I at these things, he said. Tonight seems like an exception. She should have set the glass down. She knew that even as she wrapped her hand around it, even as the warmth of it settled into her palm, and the noise of the room receded slightly, replaced by the strangely comfortable bubble that seemed to have formed around the two of them in the corner of the ballroom. What do you do, she asked, besides attend charity events and have water thrown at you? I run a company, he said. What kind? Defense contracting? Emily nodded slowly. That's vague. It's a vague industry, he said. My father was Navy, she said. The words came out before she had fully decided to say them, which was the whiskey probably, or the strange ease of him, or the exhaustion of 3 weeks of 12-hour shifts, finally breaking through the wall she kept carefully constructed between herself and the rest of the world. He was a SEAL. He died when I was 15. She didn't know why she was telling him this. She didn't tell people this. Not at parties, not in break rooms, not anywhere that required her to watch someone's face shift into the particular expression of polite discomfort that most people wore when confronted with someone else's loss. But Luke Harrison didn't wear that expression. He looked at her steadily with something that might have been recognition. I'm sorry, he said, and it was 2 words plain and direct without decoration or performance. Thank you, Emily said and meant it. They talked for a long time after that. She wasn't sure how long. The string quartet stopped and a live band started, and the crowd swelled and shifted around them, and neither of them moved. He told her things she later realized were more than he typically shared, fragments of a military career that had ended in a boardroom rather than a battlefield. A business built on a foundation of survival instincts and controlled aggression. A life that looked from the outside like the definition of success and felt from the inside like something else entirely. She told him about her father, about nursing school, about the break room and the charts and Dr. Cole's particular brand of casual cruelty, about the patients who asked for her by name, and the satisfaction that lived inside those small moments, the only satisfaction sometimes that made the rest of it bearable. At some point, the whiskey glasses were empty and refilled and empty again. At some point, Priya appeared at Emily's shoulder with an expression of absolute delight and said something about catching a ride and seeing her tomorrow, and Emily, who should have said, wait, I'll come with you, said instead, I'll be fine, which was either a bold and terrible lie or the truest thing she had said all evening. She was never entirely certain afterward exactly when the evening stopped being a conversation and started being something else. The details had a particular quality, bright at the edges, blurred in the middle like a photograph taken with a slightly shaking hand. She remembered laughing. She remembered his voice low and steady, even when everything else around her was starting to tilt. She remembered a car and a lobby and an elevator in a sense of lightness that she had not felt in years. She remembered thinking somewhere in the back of her mind that she should be more careful. She remembered not caring. And then there was the morning. The light hit her first broad and absolute, the kind of light that comes from floor-to-ceiling windows in a room several stories above the earth. Emily opened her eyes and spent approximately 3 seconds in the blank piece of someone who hasn't yet remembered anything. The ceiling was high. The sheets were the kind of expensive that announced themselves without saying a word. Somewhere to her left, a window the size of a wall looked out over a city that was already awake and moving. She sat up. She was in a room she had never seen before. A room that was not her apartment, not the small, practical one-bedroom in Wicker Park with the leaky kitchen faucet and the neighbor who played guitar until 11. This room was large and silent and immaculate, the kind of room that belonged to a hotel, except it didn't feel like a hotel room. It felt like a penthouse. An actual penthouse. Emily pressed both hands to the sides of her head and tried to reconstruct the night. The gala. The spilled water. Luke Harrison and his serious gray eyes and the whiskey and the conversation that had gone on longer than any conversation she had had in years. And then the blurred edges. The tilt. She looked down at her hand. There was a ring on her finger. It was not her ring. She did not own a ring like this. She did not own a ring at all. This was a gold band, simple and solid and absolutely real, sitting on the fourth finger of her left hand as if it had been there for decades. Emily's brain performed a very specific function in that moment, a total, complete, absolute shutdown, and then rebooted with a single thought that arrived with the force and clarity of a fire alarm. "No," she said, out loud, to the empty room. She was off the bed before she had finished. The words still in yesterday's navy dress, still in one shoe because apparently somewhere in the night she had lost the other, crossing the room and pushing through the door into the living area. Because if this was a penthouse, there was a living area. And if there was a living area, then maybe there were answers. Luke Harrison was sitting at a kitchen table large enough to host a board meeting. He was dressed not in last night's suit, but in a gray shirt and dark pants, looking unreasonably composed for a man who was presumably navigating the exact same situation she was. There was coffee in front of him. There was a document on the table. He looked up when she came in. "Good morning," he said. Emily stared at him. "Tell me that ring is a joke." He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her for a moment, that same level direct gaze that had unsettled her the night before. Except now it was unsettling in an entirely different key, and then he slid the document across the table toward her. She crossed the room and looked at it. It was a marriage certificate. Clark County, Nevada. 2 signatures at the bottom, one of which was without any possible doubt her own handwriting. Emily sat down in the nearest chair because her legs made the decision before her brain could object. "How?" she said. It wasn't really a question. It was a single syllable that's standing in for approximately 40 questions she didn't know how to ask. "I honestly," Luke said carefully, "am working through that myself." "You're working through it." She looked at him. "You're sitting there with coffee, looking completely normal, working through the fact that we are apparently," she gestured at the document. "That." "I've been awake since 5, he said. "I've had time to work through the initial response." "What was the initial response?" He looked at her steadily. "Something close to yours," he said, "minus the one shoe." Emily looked down. She was still wearing one shoe. She took it off and set it on the floor with more dignity than the situation deserved. "I want to be very clear," she said, her voice dropping to the particular register she used when she was fighting hard to stay clinical, to stay professional, to keep the panic from cracking through the surface. "That I have never done anything like this in my life. I am not someone who does things like this. I'm careful. I'm responsible. I am a nurse. I work nights. I do not go to charity galas and drink whiskey with strangers and wake up in penthouses wearing wedding rings." "I know," he said. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he agreed. "But I know enough to believe you. You're not the only one out of character here." She looked at the marriage certificate again, their names side by side, the date, the witness signatures she didn't recognize. All of it meticulously real the way only the most irreversible things are real. "What do we do?" she said flatly. "That," Luke said, "is exactly what I was hoping you'd be ready to discuss." He stood and got another cup of coffee from the machine behind him and set it in front of her without asking if she wanted it. She wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth was something to hold on to. "Annulment," she said. "That's one option. It's the obvious option." "It is," he said. "I've already called my attorney." "Good," she said. "That's good." And yet there was something in the way he said it, not reluctant exactly, but measured careful as if the word was being placed on a scale and weighed that made her look at him again. "But," she said. Luke Harrison set down his coffee cup. He looked at her for a long moment, and what she saw in his expression was not the smug ease of a powerful man who always got what he wanted. It was something considerably more unsettling than that. It was honesty. "There are complications," he said. Emily felt the floor shift slightly, the way it had shifted when she had looked at the ring. "What kind of complications?" Was this? "The kind," he said, "that are going to require us to have a very long conversation." Outside the window, Chicago sprawled in every direction, indifferent and enormous. The morning light was hard and clear, and Emily Walker, who had always been so careful, who had always made herself so small, sat in a penthouse kitchen in one shoe with a coffee mug and a marriage certificate, and the very distinct sense that her life had just walked off the edge of a map she had trusted completely. She breathed through her nose. "Then talk," she said. Luke didn't rush. That was the first thing Emily noticed about him, the way he inhabited silence without filling it unnecessarily, the way he chose his words the same way a surgeon chooses an instrument. Deliberate, precise, like a man who had spent a great deal of his life in rooms where the wrong word could cost something irreplaceable. He refilled his own coffee. He sat back down. He looked at her the way she imagined he looked at a contract he was deciding whether to sign with full attention, no performance. "I need you to understand something before I explain any of this," he said. "What I'm about to tell you stays in this room." Emily set her mug down. "You're telling me to keep secrets before you've told me what the secret is?" "I'm asking you to exercise discretion," he said. "There's a difference." "Not from where I'm sitting," she said. He almost smiled. "Fair enough." He leaned forward. "My company, Harrington Defense, we're in the middle of a federal contract negotiation. Roughly $800 million. It's been in progress for 14 months, and we are 72 hours away from final review." Emily stared at him. "Okay." "2 weeks ago, my primary competitor, a man named Victor Kane, CEO of Kane Strategic Group, filed a formal character complaint with the review board. He submitted evidence suggesting I'm unstable, personally, professionally, behaviorally." Luke's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough for Emily to catch it. He's been building a case for months. Anonymous sources, fabricated incidents, the kind of careful, coordinated destruction that looks like truth when you stack enough of it together. "And last night," Emily said slowly, the shape of it beginning to form, "didn't help. Last night," Luke said, "was on paper the CEO of a major defense contractor getting impulsively married to a woman he met at a charity event after a significant amount of alcohol." He paused. "Which is exactly the kind of thing Victor Kane has been telling the review board I'm capable of." The word impulsive landed between them like a dropped glass. Emily looked at the marriage certificate on the table. She looked at the ring on her finger. She looked at Luke Harrison, who was watching her with that careful, level gaze, and she felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, not yet, but the particular chill of a woman who is realizing that she has walked into a room with walls she didn't see coming. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to answer me honestly." "Go ahead." "How much of last night did you engineer?" The question sat in the air. Luke didn't flinch away from it, which she respected, and didn't answer it instantly, which she respected more. "None of it," he said. "I was at that gala because my foundation sponsors it. I was standing in that corner because I was avoiding a conversation with my CFO. You spilled water on me by accident. Everything after that was genuine." He held her gaze. "I want to be very clear about that." "But now that it's happened," Emily said, "you're thinking about how to use it." Silence. "I'm thinking," Luke said carefully, "about how to manage it. Those are different things." "Are they?" Emily said. He set his coffee down. "Emily, if this gets out the wrong way, reckless drunk or his team CEO loses control at public event, Victor Kane wins. $800 million in federal contracts goes to a man who has spent the last 14 months manufacturing lies. People who work for me, good people, lose their jobs. Projects that matter genuinely matter not just to my bottom line get shelved." He paused. "I'm not trying to use you. I'm trying to figure out if there's a version of this that isn't a catastrophe for everyone involved." Emily picked up her coffee. She drank it. She thought about the marriage certificate, and the ring, and the penthouse, and the fact that she had come to a charity gala in a borrowed dress and was now apparently a variable in a federal contract negotiation. "What does your attorney say?" she said. "She says an annulment is possible and clean if we move quickly and quietly. No press, no public record, no lasting damage." He paused. "She also said, and I want to be transparent about this, that if we were to present this as a real marriage, at least through the review period, it would actually strengthen my position. Stable, settled, recently married. It counters Kane's narrative directly." There it was. Emily put the mug down very carefully. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" "I want you to understand all the options," he said. That's not an answer. No, Luke said quietly. It isn't. He leaned forward. What I actually want is for none of this to have happened. What I actually want is to not be sitting across from a woman I barely know, asking her to navigate something that isn't her problem and wasn't her choice. Something shifted in his expression, not vulnerability exactly, but the edge of it. But here we are, and I'm not going to pretend I don't need help. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Chicago moved on without her. How long? She said. 3 weeks, and he said, until the contract is awarded. Then we proceed with the annulment quietly, and you go back to your life, completely intact. I compensate you for your time and your disruption, and we never have to see each other again if that's what you want. Compensate me, she repeated. Yes, you want to pay me. I want to make sure you're not disadvantaged by a situation you didn't ask for, he said. What you call it is up to you. Emily Walker looked at Luke Harrison for a long, unblinking moment. She looked at the marriage certificate. She looked at the ring. She thought about her apartment in Wicker Park and the leaky faucet and the 12-hour shifts, and Dr. Marcus Cole's smile, cold, satisfied, belonging to a man who had never once been told no. Then she said, I need to go home. He didn't argue. He called a car. He handed her her other shoe, which had apparently been sitting on a shelf near the door the entire time, and didn't make a single comment about it. He walked her to the elevator and pressed the button and stood there until the doors closed, and the last thing Emily saw before the floors started dropping was his face, composed, controlled, giving nothing away except the slight tension in the line of his jaw that told her he was not, in fact, as composed as he looked. The drive home took 20 minutes. Emily spent all 20 of them sitting in the back of a town car staring at the ring on her finger, turning it slowly, trying to locate the feeling that was pressing against the inside of her rib cage. It wasn't panic. It wasn't anger. It was something more complicated, the feeling of standing at an intersection and realizing that every road in every direction leads somewhere you've never been. Priya was sitting on her front steps. Emily stopped walking when she saw her. Priya was in yesterday's clothes holding a coffee cup, and the expression on her face was the exact combination of concern and barely contained curiosity that Emily had been dreading. I waited, Priya said simply. I see that, Emily said. You didn't answer your phone. My phone died. Your dress is still on. Yes, Emily said. Priya stood up. She looked at Emily's hand. She looked at the ring. She looked back at Emily's face. And then in a voice stripped entirely of its usual levity, she said, Emily, what happened? It wasn't a question. It was an opening in the kind you offer someone when you already know the answer is going to be larger than you expected and you're choosing to hold space for it anyway. Emily had always loved that about Priya. She stayed, even when staying was inconvenient. I need coffee first, Emily said. Real coffee, in my apartment. Done, Priya said, and followed her inside. They sat at Emily's kitchen table, the small practical one that had come with the apartment, and bore a coffee ring stain that no amount of cleaning had ever removed, and Emily talked. She didn't rehearse it. She didn't edit it. She just told it from the beginning, starting with the spilled water and Luke Harrison's serious gray eyes moving through the whiskey and the conversation and the blurred edges and arriving at the marriage certificate and the penthouse and the 3 weeks and the compensation. Priya did not say a single word the entire time. When Emily finished, the silence stretched out for 5 full seconds. Then Priya said, Okay, first, are you okay? I don't know, Emily said honestly. Second, nothing happened that you didn't. No, Emily said firmly. No, I've thought about that very carefully, and the answer is no. Whatever happened last night, I was a participant, not a victim. Priya exhaled. Okay, third, she leaned forward. Luke Harrison, as in Luke Harrison of Harrington Defense, as in the man who was on the cover of Forbes 2 years ago, as in the man whose net worth of Priya. I'm just establishing context, Priya said. I know who he is, Emily said. I looked him up in the car. And Emily set her coffee down. And nothing. It doesn't matter who he is. What matters is that I am apparently married to him, and he wants me to stay married to him for 3 weeks for the sake of a federal contract, and I need to decide what to do about that. Priya was quiet for a moment. What are you leaning toward? I should say no, Emily said. That's not what I asked. Emily pressed her fingers against her eyes. I don't know, Priya. He was honest. I didn't expect him to be that honest. He didn't try to spin it or manipulate it. He laid it out and let me decide. He's a negotiator, Priya said. Honesty can be a strategy. I know that, Emily said. But, but he had this look when he talked about the people who work for him. Emily paused. Like they were real to him. Like it mattered. Priya studied her. You liked him. I don't know him. But last night you apparently liked him enough to… Priya. Sorry, she wasn't sorry. What are you going to do? Emily looked at the ring on her finger. The morning light came through the kitchen window and hit the gold band and made it look for just a second like something that had always been there. I'm going to take a shower, Emily said, and then I'm going to think. She thought for 3 hours. She made a list, an actual paper list, because she had always been a paperless person, because her father had been a paperless person, because some things you inherit without choosing to. On one side, reasons to say no, on the other, reasons to say yes. The reasons to say no were sensible, logical, and numerous. The reasons to say yes were fewer, stranger, and harder to articulate, but they had weight. She called him at 2 in the afternoon. He answered on the second ring. I have conditions, she said, a beat. Tell me. I go back to my job, every shift, no disruption to my work schedule. Agreed. My private life stays private. No press access, no interviews, nothing I haven't explicitly approved. Agreed. You tell me the truth, all of it. Anything that affects me, I hear it from you first. Not from a headline, not from your attorney, not from whoever else is in your orbit. From you. Silence for a moment. Then, agreed. And no compensation, she said. I'm not doing this for money. Another silence. Longer this time. Then why are you doing it? Emily looked at her paper list. At the reasons on the right side, the strange weightless ones that she couldn't quite name, but couldn't ignore. Because it's the right thing to do, she said, and because I think you're actually telling me the truth, and because I've spent 3 years making myself small for people who didn't deserve the effort, and for once, I'd like to do something that actually matters. She paused. And because I was there too, last night. Whatever happened, I was there. So this is my mess too. Luke Harrison was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. All right, he said, and then in a voice that was quieter than any voice she had heard from him, thank you, Emily. She hung up before she could say anything she'd regret. The next 72 hours were a controlled storm. Luke's team, and there was a team. She discovered a small army of assistants and advisors and a communications director named Diane who looked at Emily the way a chess player looks at a piece she didn't place, moved with terrifying efficiency. There were logistics to manage appearances, to coordinate a carefully worded statement, drafted and reviewed and drafted again. Emily went to work both days, kept her head down, and said nothing to anyone except Priya, who said nothing to anyone and deserved some kind of medal for it. On the third morning, Luke called. There's a dinner tonight, he said. A private one. 4 people. My CFO, his wife, and Victor Kane. Emily's hand tightened on the phone. Victor Kane is going to be there. Yes. The man who's been trying to destroy you. Business is social, Luke said. It always has been. He accepted the invitation because not accepting would look like avoidance. He'll come, he'll smile, he'll watch us. And what am I supposed to do? Be exactly who you are, Luke said. You don't need to perform anything. You just need to be present. You say that like it's simple, Emily said. I know it isn't, he said. But for what it's worth, the version of you I met 3 nights ago isn't someone who needs coaching. She almost said something real to that. She caught it just in time. What time? She said instead. 7. I'll have a car at your building at 6:30. She spent the afternoon at work, moved through her patients with the focused calm she had always been able to summon when it mattered, and tried not to think about the dinner. She almost succeeded. Then at 4:15, Dr. Marcus Cole stopped her in the hallway. Walker, he said, I heard a rumor. Emily turned. About you. He smiled that cold, satisfied smile. Something about a very public and very hasty marriage this weekend. Is that right? The break room went quiet. 3 nurses, a resident, all of them watching. Emily felt a familiar contraction, the instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make herself smaller. She felt it, and then she watched it pass through her like a wave and recede. Yes, she said simply. Cole's smile widened. A CEO, they're saying. That's quite a step up for a clinic nurse. It is, Emily said pleasantly. Will that be all? He blinked. He had expected more from her. He had expected the flush, the stammer, the eyes dropping to the floor. He had aimed at a target he had been hitting for 8 months, and the target had simply stepped to the side. Careful Walker, he said, recovering. Men like that don't marry women like you for real reasons. Emily looked at him for a moment. Then she said quietly, without heat, without performance, Dr. Cole, you have been wrong about me every single day since I started working here. I think your record will hold. She turned and walked back down the hallway. Behind her, she heard nothing. Not a word. Not a laugh. Just silence, which was somehow better than any response. The car was at her building at exactly 6:30. She was in the lobby at exactly 6:29. The dress she had chosen was hers, not borrowed. Not the graduation dress, a simple black sheath she had bought 2 years ago for a reason she couldn't remember and never used. It fit better than she expected. Luke was in the car. He looked at her when she got in one quick, complete look, the kind that took in everything, and said nothing for a moment. Then, you look like someone ready for a fight. Isn't that the point? She said. He almost smiled. Yes, he said, it is. The restaurant was quiet and expensive and exactly what Emily had expected. The CFO, James Merritt, shook her hand firmly and said he was delighted, and his wife Karen said Emily was absolutely lovely and meant it, and Emily liked them both almost immediately, which she hadn't anticipated. Victor Kane arrived 11 minutes late. He was shorter than she had imagined. Compact, gray-haired, with the kind of eyes that were warm on the surface and utterly cold underneath the eyes of a man who had learned a very long time ago that friendliness was the most effective weapon in any room. He shook Luke's hand. He kissed Karen's cheek. He turned to Emily with a smile that was a masterpiece of social grace. Mrs. Harrison, he said, what a wonderful surprise. And there it was, the weight of it, the specific pressure of a man who had chosen those words with surgical precision. Not congratulations, not pleasure to meet you. Just what a wonderful surprise. Emily looked at him. She thought about her father, who had taught her that the only response to a man trying to unsettle you is absolute stillness. She thought about 3 years of being overlooked and underestimated and reduced to a job title. She thought about this paper list on her kitchen table and the reasons on the right side that she still couldn't quite name. She smiled. Mr. Kane, she said warmly, Luke has told me so much about you. She watched it, the tiny fracture there, and gone in less than a second. The slight recalibration behind his eyes. Luke's hand found the small of her back. Light, steady. The dinner was just beginning. Victor Kane had the particular talent of making every question sound like a compliment and every compliment sound like a threat. He had done it 3 times already before the appetizers arrived, asking Emily about her work at the clinic with the kind of warm, interested tone that somehow managed to underline in invisible ink the word small. He asked how she and Luke had met with the patient smile of a man collecting information he already had. He asked how long they had known each other, with his head tilted and his eyes friendly and absolutely nothing friendly behind them. Emily answered each question cleanly, directly, without elaborating beyond what was asked. She had learned that in nursing, that the person asking the questions is rarely asking what they appear to be asking, and that the safest response is always the simplest one. You must have made quite an impression, Victor said, lifting his wine glass. Luke isn't exactly known for impulsive decisions. He smiled across the table. No offense intended. None taken, Emily said. And you're right, he's not impulsive. But I don't think recognizing something real when it's in front of you qualifies as impulsive. She met his eyes. Do you... Karen Merritt made a small sound that might have been approval. James Merritt looked at his plate. Victor Kane held Emily's gaze for exactly 1 second longer than was comfortable, and then he laughed, warm, social, completely constructed. Well said, he told her. Luke, she's remarkable. I know, Luke said simply, and didn't look at Victor when he said it. He looked at Emily. It was the first time all evening that something passed between them that wasn't coordinated. Just a look. Direct and brief, and carrying something she couldn't quite name. Emily felt it land somewhere in her chest and didn't let it show on her face. The dinner moved through its courses. Victor Kane kept talking. He was brilliant at it, the gradual, almost imperceptible turn of conversation toward territory that suited him the way a river carves through stone, not by force but by patience. By the time the main course arrived, he had guided the table to a discussion of the federal contract review with the ease of a man who had done it 100 times. The review board has been thorough, Victor said pleasantly. More thorough than usual, I think. There's a lot of scrutiny this cycle. He refilled his own glass. Character assessments, personal history, the kind of digging that can unearth some uncomfortable things even for the most upstanding companies. He paused. But I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Accountability. Luke picked up his water glass. Accountability, he repeated, with the calm of a man diffusing something he can see and isn't afraid of. Absolutely. The contracts matter too much for anything less. Exactly my thinking, Victor said. Which is why I think the board made the right call adding the supplemental review period. He looked at Luke with those warm, cold eyes. You heard about that. The table shifted. Emily felt it, a change in the air pressure, a slight tightening in the hand Luke rested on the table near hers. I heard this afternoon, Luke said. His voice was exactly the same. Not a crack, not a flutter. 2 additional weeks. Just to be thorough, Victor said. Emily kept her expression neutral. 2 additional weeks, which meant 5 weeks total instead of 3. Which meant 5 weeks of dinners, like this one of Victor Kane and his invisible ink questions and his patient river carving. She had agreed to 3 weeks. Nobody had told her about 5. She reached for her water glass and kept breathing. After dinner in the car on the way back, Luke told her before she could ask. I found out at 4 o'clock, he said. I should have called you before I sent the car. I'm sorry. Emily was quiet for a moment. 2 more weeks. Yes. That's 5 total. Yes. She turned and looked at him. You told me you'd tell me everything first. Before headlines, before attorneys, before anyone else. That was one of my conditions. I know, he said, and I failed it on day 3. I'm not going to defend that. He met her eyes. I'm telling you now, what do you want to do? She looked at her hands in her lap, at the ring that had been on her finger for 4 days and was starting to feel in some small and alarming way familiar. Did Victor engineer the extension, she asked. Almost certainly, Luke said. He has 2 contacts on the board. He's been playing a long game from the beginning. And the extension hurts you. It gives him more time to keep building his case, Luke said. More time for something to go wrong. More time for me to look unstable. Emily almost laughed, not at the situation but at the word unstable, as if the man sitting beside her, who had been controlled and honest and precise through every moment she had known him, could be legitimately accused of instability. She thought about Victor Kane's warm, cold eyes and felt something she recognized from 3 years of watching Dr. Marcus Cole. The particular fury that comes not from being attacked, but from watching a competent person be deliberately, systematically, unfairly reduced. Fine, she said. Luke looked at her. Fine, 5 weeks, she said, same conditions. Something moved through his expression. She caught it, and then it was gone. You don't have to. I said, fine, Luke. She looked out the window. Let's not make it into something. He was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you. She didn't answer, but she didn't take it back either. The next morning, everything changed in a way none of them had planned for. Emily was 40 minutes into her shift at Mercy General when Priya found her at the medication cart with her phone held out and her face wearing an expression Emily had never seen on her before, something caught between alarm and fascination. You need to see this right now, Priya said. It was a photograph, posted to a major Chicago social column at 11 the night before taken, Emily realized with a slow, cold recognition at the restaurant. She and Luke at the table, his hand on her back, her looking up at him. The angle made it look not staged, the opposite of staged. It looked like 2 people who had forgotten anyone else was in the room. The caption read, Harrington Defense CEO Luke Harrison and his new wife, a nurse from a North Side clinic, spotted at an intimate dinner last night. Sources say the whirlwind marriage happened just days ago. Chicago's most powerful bachelor is officially off the market. Emily read it twice. Then she set the phone down on the medication cart and breathed through her nose. Someone at the restaurant took it, Priya said quietly. Victor Kane has sources everywhere, Emily said. Her own voice sounded distant to her, like it was coming from another room. Emily, well, I'm fine, she said. I'm at her work. I have patience. She picked up the chart she had been holding and walked down the hallway. She was not fine, but she was functional, which had always been enough. By noon, three of her colleagues had made comments. Two were kind, the fumbling kind of kind that people manage when they don't know what else to do. One was not. One was Dr. Marcus Cole, who stopped her outside the supply room and said with that smile, "Quite the press debut," in a voice designed to carry to the nurse's station 10 feet away. Emily looked at him. "Was there something you needed, Dr. Cole?" "Just checking in," he said. "Big changes, big world you've landed in." He tilted his head. "Must be overwhelming for someone like you." "Someone like me," she repeated. "A clinic nurse," he said pleasantly. "Not exactly prepared for that kind of exposure." Emily had spent 3 years absorbing this. 3 years of making herself smaller, of breathing through her nose, of choosing not to fight battles she was afraid she'd lose. 3 years of someone like Marcus Cole using her own fear against her. She was tired. "You know what I've noticed, Dr. Cole," she said, keeping her voice level. "You spend a remarkable amount of energy on my life for someone who claims to barely consider me worth the effort. I'd think about what that says if I were you." She walked past him before he could recover. She did not let herself shake until she was inside the supply closet with the door closed. She called Luke at 1 in the afternoon, in between patients standing in the stairwell. "I saw the photo," she said. "I know, I'm sorry. Victor." "I know it was Victor," she said. "I need to know if this changes anything. On your end, with the review board." "Diane thinks it might actually help," Luke said. "It makes the marriage look real, natural, not like damage control." "Because it's not posed," Emily said. "Right." She was quiet. "Then, someone is going to start looking at me, Luke. Reporters, Victor's people. Someone is going to start digging into my background and my work and my life, and they're going to find a 31-year-old nurse from a small clinic with a dead father and a leaky faucet and absolutely nothing remarkable." Or Luke said, "They're going to find a woman who put herself through nursing school, graduated near the top of her class, and built a career on genuine competence in a field that doesn't reward good people nearly enough." He paused. "Depending on who's looking." Emily pressed the back of her head against the stairwell wall. Something about the way he said it, not performed, not strategic, just factual, undid something small and stubborn in her chest. "I have 2 more patients," she said. "I'll call you tonight." "I'll be here," he said. She had 3 more patients, actually, and the third one was what broke the day open in a way she hadn't expected. His name was Raymond Holt. 74 years old. He'd been admitted 2 days earlier with a minor cardiac event and was waiting for a stress test result. He was cranky about the food and suspicious of the TV remote, and absolutely bracingly honest in the way that men of his generation sometimes are when they decide they have nothing left to prove. Emily came in to check his vitals, and he looked at her with sharp blue eyes and said, "You're the one who married the defense man." Emily checked his blood pressure. "I am." "Saw the picture on the news," he said. "My daughter called me about it. She was excited." He studied Emily. "You don't look like someone who got swept off her feet." "How do I look?" Emily said. He considered. "Like someone figuring something out." Emily made a note in his chart. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Holt?" "Don't change the subject," he said. "I'm 74 and I'm in a hospital bed. I've earned the right to ask direct questions." He leaned forward slightly. "You in trouble, young lady?" Emily looked at him, at his sharp blue eyes and his honest, weathered face, and the complete absence of agenda in his voice. "No," she said. "I'm just finding my footing." He said. "The man, is he a good one?" She thought about Luke in the car saying, "I failed it on day 3, not defending it," meeting her eyes. She thought about the way he had said "your father" and meant it. She thought about his hand on her back at dinner, light steady, not claiming her just there. "I think so," she said. "I'm still figuring that out too." "Well," Raymond Holt said, settling back against his pillow, "that's the honest answer. I'll give you that." He looked at the ceiling. "My wife and I hated each other for the first 4 months. She thought I was reckless. I thought she was rigid. 51 years later, I'd have been nothing without her." He shrugged. "Figuring it out is part of it." Emily finished her notes. She was at the door when he said, "Hey, nurse." She turned. "Don't shrink for him," Raymond said. "Whoever he is, don't make yourself smaller to fit into his life. That never works. Believe me." Emily looked at him for a moment. "Thank you, Mr. Holt." "Raymond, he said. I'm in the hospital. Use my name. She was still thinking about it when she got home that night. Still thinking about it when Luke called at 8, which he had started doing not to discuss logistics, just to check in, which was something she was trying not to read anything into. Victor made a move today, Luke said, beyond the photo. Emily put down the glass of water she had been holding. What kind? He had someone approach 2 of my key engineers. Recruitment pitch, generous offer packaged as coincidental timing. His voice was even, but she was starting to learn the difference between Luke's actual evenness and the performed kind. This was performed. He's trying to thin my technical team before the review. Can he do that legally? Legal doesn't mean harmless, Luke said. He knows my team. He knows who matters. He's not recruiting randomly. Did anyone accept? Not yet, Luke said. But not yet isn't no. Emily sat down. What do you need? A beat of silence. I need you at the Foundation's public event on Saturday. It's been scheduled for months. I can't cancel it without it looking like retreat. Media will be there. Victor will almost certainly make an appearance. What kind of event? Hospital fundraiser, Luke said. Children's ward renovation at St. Christopher's. Emily made a sound that might have been a laugh. You want to take a nurse to a hospital fundraiser? I want to take my wife to an event that matters, he said. But yes, the optics are not lost on me. She almost said something real again. She was doing that more often, stopping herself at the edge of something genuine, pulling back, because genuine was the one thing she couldn't afford to be. Not yet. Not in the middle of 5 weeks that still had most of their length ahead of them. Fine, she said. Saturday. Saturday arrived with the weight of a test she hadn't studied for. The event was held at St. Christopher's Hospital in a ballroom on the 4th floor that looked out over the city. Emily knew St. Christopher's. She had done a rotation there in nursing school. She knew the children's ward. She knew what that renovation meant in real terms, in human terms, in the terms that existed before money and politics made everything abstract. She and Luke arrived together. He had a way of moving through a room not aggressively, not with the performed confidence she had seen in 100 other powerful men, but with a steadiness that seemed to reorganize the space around him the way a strong current reorganizes water. People moved toward him naturally. He introduced Emily to each of them with a consistency that she noticed and held on to, not as my wife or as Emily, but always both. This is my wife, Emily. Both parts, every time. Victor Kane arrived 40 minutes in. He was not alone. He had brought a woman Emily didn't recognize. A communications consultant, Luke murmured quietly at her ear, and a photographer who was clearly not the hired event photographer because he was positioned wrong-angled toward Luke, specifically waiting. He's going to try to create a moment, Luke said. What kind of moment? The kind that looks bad in a still image, Luke said. He did it to my predecessor at a gala 6 years ago. Caught him mid-expression out of context, ran it with a headline that ended his career. His jaw was tight. Don't let him separate us. Emily nodded once. She understood. She had spent 3 years watching Dr. Cole manage optics the way powerful people in closed environments controlled the narrative by controlling the image. She knew how this worked. What she didn't anticipate was the child. She was 7 years old, maybe 8, in a hospital bracelet and a dress that someone had brought from home to make the event feel special. She was standing slightly apart from the adult crowd with the particular stillness of a child in a situation too large for her, and she was looking at a display on the wall. Architectural renderings of the new ward, bright and colorful and full of promise, with an expression that Emily recognized from the inside out. It was the expression of someone trying to believe something good is really coming. Emily moved towards her without deciding to. It was instinct. It was the same instinct that had made her a nurse. She crouched down. What's your name? The girl looked at her. Maya. That's a beautiful name. Are you here for the fundraiser? My mom is, Maya said. I'm a patient. I have a room on the 4th floor. She looked at the rendering. Is that what it's going to look like? That's the plan, Emily said. Do you like it? Maya studied the image seriously. It has more windows, she said. The windows are good. When it's dark outside and the lights are on inside, it looks like the whole world is lit up. Emily looked at the rendering, then she looked at the girl. It does, she said quietly. You're right. She didn't notice Luke had moved to stand beside her until she stood up and found him there. He was looking at Maya with an expression Emily had not seen on his face before, not the controlled steadiness, not the careful composure. Something open, something that had gotten through the wall. Maya looked up at him with the fearlessness that children sometimes have. Are you going to help pay for it? I'm going to try up a money, Luke said. Good, Maya said seriously and wandered back toward her mother. Emily and Luke stood there for a moment side by side in the brief quiet left by a 7-year-old's exit. Why this, Emily said quietly. Out of everything you could fund, why children's hospital wards? He was quiet for a moment. She thought he might deflect. He didn't. My sister was sick when we were kids, he said. A long time. She spent about 14 months in a ward like the one that used to be here. Cold, outdated, the kind of place that was functional but not human. He paused. She's fine now. She's been fine for 20 years. But I remember what it looked like, what it felt like to walk in there every day and see her trying to be brave in a place that gave her nothing to be brave with. He paused again. Windows matter, color matters. It's not abstract. Emily looked at him. She looked at the man who ran a defense company worth billions of dollars and had sat at a dinner table 3 nights ago with the patience of a soldier and the composure of a CEO, and she saw for the first time the thing underneath all of it. Not weakness, nothing about Luke Harrison was weak, but depth, the kind of depth that comes from actual experience with loss and love and the understanding that some things matter in ways that have nothing to do with power. She felt something shift inside her. Not fall, she was too careful for that. But shift, the way a door shifts when the lock begins to consider giving. And then across the room, she saw Victor Kane watching them. His photographer was angled their way. And on Victor's face was an expression she hadn't seen before. Not the warm, cold smile, not the patient river-carving patience. Something tighter. Something that looked just for a second like recalculation. Like a man who had just realized the piece he thought he understood had moved in a way he didn't expect. Luke noticed her stillness. He followed her gaze. He saw Victor. He sees it, Emily said quietly. Sees what? Luke said. She thought about Raymond Holt in his hospital bed, about 51 years and figuring it out, being part of it, about windows and color and the things that matter in ways that have nothing to do with power. That this might be more complicated than he planned for, she said. Luke looked at her for a moment. Then he said very quietly, for both of us. Emily didn't answer that, but she didn't look away either. And across the room, Victor Kane watched them and recalculated, and the warm, cold smile came back. Slower this time, more careful, like a man who was changing his strategy. Victor Kane changed his strategy on a Monday. Emily knew it before Luke told her, the way she sometimes knew a patient was declining, before the monitors confirmed it, a shift in the quality of the air. Something off in the rhythm of things. She had been at work for 4 hours when Diane, Luke's communications director, called her personal phone for the first time. I need you to know something before it hits, Diane said. No greeting, no preamble. Diane was not a preamble kind of person, which Emily had come to appreciate. Victor's team submitted a supplemental filing to the review board this morning. It's not about Luke's business record. Emily kept walking down the hallway, keeping her voice low. What is it about you? Diane said. Emily stopped walking. They're framing it as a question of judgment, Diane continued, specifically Luke's judgment. The argument is that a man who marries a woman he met hours earlier, a woman with no public profile and no verifiable connection to his professional world, is demonstrating the same instability they've been building the case around. A pause. They're not attacking you personally, they're using you as evidence. Emily started walking again. She had learned very quickly that standing still in a hospital hallway attracted attention. What kind of evidence? The marriage was impulsive. The wife is unknown. Therefore, the CEO is unstable. Diane's voice was flat and precise. It's actually a fairly elegant argument if you look at it from a distance. I'm not looking at it from a distance, Emily said. I'm standing in the middle of it. I know, which is why I'm calling you directly. Diane paused. There are 2 ways to respond. We either get ahead of it, give the board and the press something more substantial about who you are, a controlled profile managed narrative, or we stay quiet and let them speculate, which only feeds the story. Another pause. Luke wanted to be the one to tell you. I'm telling you because you have 4 hours before his attorney responds to the filing, and you need to be part of that conversation. Emily thanked her and hung up. She stood in the stairwell, her stairwell, the one between the second and third floors, where she had started taking difficult phone calls, and she let herself feel it for exactly 60 seconds. The particular cold of being used as a weapon. Not targeted, not attacked, but picked up and aimed at someone else. Used. Then she called Luke. He answered before the first ring finished. Diane called you. Yes, Emily said. I'm sorry, he said. It's fine, she said. I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because we need to talk before your attorney responds, and I need you to hear me. She kept her voice steady. They are using me as evidence. That means I'm not just a bystander in this anymore. I'm an argument, which means I get a voice in how that argument gets answered. Silence for a moment. Then, you're right. I know I'm right, she said. So, what are the options? He laid them out clearly the way he always did. No softening, no spin, just the information in its actual shape. Option 1, the controlled profile. A carefully assembled picture of Emily Walker, her background, her work, her father's legacy, presented to the board and to selected press. Clean, true, and managed. Option 2, a public interview. Emily and Luke together answering questions humanizing the marriage. Higher risk, higher reward. Option 3, legal counterfiling. Challenging the legitimacy of Victor's supplemental argument, which would delay the review further and create more public noise. What does your attorney recommend? Emily asked. Option 1, Luke said. She thinks the interview is too unpredictable. What do you think? A beat. I think you'd be extraordinary in the interview and the board would respond to it. But I don't want to put you in a position. Option 2, Emily said. Luke. She pressed the back of her head against the stairwell wall, the same wall she had leaned against when she first understood that 5 weeks was not 3. I came into this because it was the right thing to do. I didn't come in to be managed. If they're using me as an argument, then I'm going to be the best possible answer to that argument. On my terms. She paused. Set up the interview. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight to it. She was beginning to recognize the different textures of Luke. Harrison's silence, the thinking kind, the processing kind, the thing, I'm not saying kind. This one was the last. All right, he said finally. Wednesday evening, I know a journalist I trust. Define trust, Emily said. She won't fabricate, he said. She'll ask real questions. She won't protect us from hard things, but she won't manufacture them either. Good, Emily said. That's exactly what I want. She hung up and went back to her patients and spent the rest of the shift with her full attention on the work, because that was the one place where nothing was complicated, where the rules were clear and the stakes were human, and the right thing to do was almost always knowable if you paid close enough attention. It was during that shift that she noticed something about Raymond Holt. He had been discharged 2 days earlier, but his chart was still on her station because she had been finishing a follow-up note. She wasn't thinking about it consciously. But when she passed the nurse's station and saw a man standing there asking for his discharge instructions, a man she didn't recognize in a suit that was too good for a Tuesday afternoon clinic visit, something made her slow down. He was asking about Raymond Holt specifically. Not as a visitor, as someone requesting administrative information. Emily stopped at the station. Can I help you? The man looked at her. He had the particular blankness of someone in a professional role whose job requires them to be unremarkable. I'm looking into a patient inquiry. Mr. Holt was listed as a former colleague of... I can't share any patient information, Emily said. You'd need to speak with administration. Do you have authorization? He smiled. Of course, just routine. Administration is on the first floor, Emily said. They can help you. He left. Emily watched him go. Then she looked at her colleague behind the station, a nurse named Dana, who had been there 8 years and had the instincts of someone who had seen everything. Dana was watching the man leave with the same expression Emily felt on her own face. Did he identify himself? Emily asked quietly. Said he was with an insurance company, Dana said. Didn't give a name. Emily looked at Raymond Holt's chart. She thought about the hospital fundraiser. She thought about Maya and her windows. She thought about the man in the suit who had asked about a patient she had spoken to warmly at an event that had been photographed. She called Luke at 3:15. "Someone came to my clinic today asking about a patient," she said. "A patient I spoke with at the fundraiser. The patient is not connected to you, to your company, or to any of this. He's just a man in his 70s, recovering from a cardiac event, who happened to be in the room when we were there." Her voice was controlled, carefully controlled. "Victor is digging into my patients, Luke." The sound Luke made was quiet and specific. She had not heard that sound from him before. It was the sound of a man whose composure had just met its limit. "Are you sure?" he said. "I'm a clinic nurse," she said. "I notice things that are out of place." That man was out of place. She paused. "I want to be very clear about what I'm telling you. I agreed to 5 weeks of dinners and events and a photograph in a social column. I did not agree to have my patients investigated. I did not agree to have the people I care for used as pressure points." "I know," Luke said. His voice was different now, quieter, harder. The voice of a man who had moved past management into something older and more fundamental. "I'm going to make some calls." "What kind of calls?" "The kind that make it very clear to Victor that certain things are entirely off the table," he said. "Emily, I need you to trust me on this. 48 hours. She wanted to say she didn't trust anyone on 48 hours. She had lived her whole adult life making decisions based on evidence, not faith, because faith had not historically been well placed in her experience. She wanted to say that. Instead, she said 48 hours. "Then I need to know what you found." "You'll know before anyone else," he said. "That's not a condition anymore. That's just how it is." She noticed the shift in the sentence. Not "I agreed to your condition." Just "that's how it is." As if it had become a fact of his life rather than a term of an agreement. She noticed it and didn't say anything about it, and spent the rest of the shift trying not to think about it. Wednesday came. The journalist's name was Carol Weston, 60 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of eyes that had been watching people tell partial truths for so long that she could see the shape of the full truth underneath. She met them in a private room at a hotel downtown, just her and a recorder and a notepad, and absolutely no performance. Emily liked her immediately. Carol Weston asked Emily about her father first. Not about Luke, not about the marriage, not about Harrington Defense. About Chief Petty Officer James Walker, Navy SEAL, who had died at a kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon when his daughter was 15 years old. Emily talked about him for 12 minutes. She hadn't planned to. She hadn't planned to say anything beyond the basic facts, the headline version she carried around like a rehearsed answer. But Carol Weston had a way of asking the second question, the one after you'd answered the first, that peeled something back. And Emily, who had been keeping things carefully contained for weeks and years, found herself saying things she had not said out loud in a very long time. She talked about finding him, about the waiting room, about Rosa the nurse who had stayed, about nursing school and the 17 rejections, and Mercy General's yes, and the 12-hour shifts, and the patients who asked for her by name, and the satisfaction that lived in those small moments. She talked about it like it was just a life, like it wasn't extraordinary, because to her it wasn't. It was just the things she had done, the things she had chosen, the reasons she had gotten up every morning for 15 years. Carol Weston made a note. Then she looked up and said, "Mrs. Harrison, do you love your husband?" The room went completely still. Emily felt Luke go still beside her. She didn't look at him. She looked at Carol Weston, who was watching her with those truth-reading eyes, and she understood that this was the question. The one the whole interview had been building toward. The one that had no managed answer. She thought about a marriage certificate on a hotel table, about a ring that had started to feel familiar, about his hand on her back, light, steady, about a man who said, "I failed it" on day 3 and didn't defend it, about Maya and the windows in his voice when he talked about his sister, about 48 hours, and that's just how it is. She said, "I think what Luke and I have is something most people don't get to have, the experience of being completely honest with each other before we had any reason to be careful. We didn't have time to perform. We didn't have time to be the best versions of ourselves. We just had to be real." She paused. "And what I found when I looked at who he actually is someone I respect more than almost anyone I've known." She paused again. Ask me if I love him again in 6 months, she said. I'll have a better answer. Carol Weston smiled. It was the first real smile she had shown in the entire interview. She made another note. That, she said, is the most honest answer I've heard in 20 years of interviews. Luke didn't say anything until they were in the car. Then he said quietly without looking at her, "You didn't have to say any of that." "I know," Emily said. "The part about respect," he said. "You meant it." It wasn't a question. She answered it anyway. "Yes," she said. "I did." Another of his weighted silences. The city moved past the windows. "Emily Amerno," he said. "Don't," she said quietly. "I haven't said anything." "I know what you are going to say, and I need you not to say it right now," she said. "Because we are in the middle of something, and I need to be able to think clearly, and if you say it, I won't be able to." She looked out the window. "So please, just don't." He was quiet. Then, "Okay, just that. Okay." No push, no argument, no leveraging the moment. She was aware that this too was a form of honesty, the willingness to hold something back when the other person needed space. She was aware that it was one of the things she had come to count on from him. She was aware that counting on him had happened without her noticing. The interview published Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, everything had changed. Not the way Luke's attorney had managed it, not the way Diane had planned it. It changed the way real things change, not because of strategy, but because of truth, which has a particular velocity when it finally gets moving. The piece was shared 40,000 times by end of day. It ran with the photograph from the fundraiser, not the one Victor's photographer had taken, but one the event's own photographer had captured. Emily crouched down level with Maya's height, both of them looking at the rendering of the new ward. Maya's face serious and wondering and lit from within. Emily's face in profile, soft and present in a way that couldn't be manufactured. Luke was mentioned in the piece. His company was mentioned. The review board was not mentioned once. Carol Weston had written it not as a defense of a CEO, but as a portrait of a woman, a specific, particular real woman who had gotten up every morning for 15 years and done hard work and stayed. The review board received 12 letters of support from Mercy General patients by Friday. Emily found out because Priya called her nearly incoherent with a combination of pride and awe and told her that Raymond Holt himself had written one. 3 paragraphs, handwritten, delivered by his daughter. Emily sat down on her kitchen floor and cried for approximately 4 minutes. Not from sadness, from the specific unfamiliar feeling of being seen, not managed, not positioned, not used as an argument. Just seen. She called Luke. He answered on the first ring. "Did you know about Raymond Holt?" she said. "No," he said. "I found out an hour ago." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm on my kitchen floor," she said. "So working on it." "Do you need me to?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm fine. I just needed to tell someone who would understand why it matters." A beat of silence. Then quietly, "I understand why it matters." She believed him. That was the strange part. She believed him completely and without effort, which was not how she typically believed things. She was a woman who needed evidence, who needed time, who needed the careful accumulation of proof before she would let anything be true. But this was already true. She could feel it the way you feel a fact you haven't yet found the words for. Victor Kane's countermove came Friday evening, and it was the ugliest thing he had done yet. Luke called her at 7, and she knew from the first syllable, the particular compression in his voice, the contained quality of a man holding something that wants to move, that this was not a routine update. "He went after your father," Luke said. Emily went completely still. "What?" "He submitted a second supplemental filing. He's arguing that your father's SEAL records, specifically 2 operations that remain classified, constitute a national security adjacency concern. He's suggesting that you, as the spouse of a defense contractor, CEO, may represent an unverified security risk by association." Luke's voice was steady and furious simultaneously, which she had not known was possible until this moment. "It's complete fabrication. There is no reasonable interpretation of your father's service that creates any kind of security concern. But it creates noise, it creates delay, and it drags your father's name into a filing that will become part of the public record." Emily said nothing for a very long time. Her father had been a good man, a quiet man, A man who had served his country for 22 years and come home to a kitchen table in a Tuesday afternoon and had never in all of that been anything other than honorable. He had been a SEAL and a father and a man who left lists on paper because some things you needed to see in your own handwriting. He had been dead for 16 years and he had never harmed a single person who didn't need stopping. And Victor Kane had just used his name as a filing attachment. "Luke," Emily said. "I know," he said. "I need you to tell me exactly what you're going to do about this." "I'm going to dismantle him," Luke said. And the way he said it, quiet, precise, the voice of a man who had been patient long enough, was not a threat. It was a fact. "How?" she said. "I've had an investigator on Victor Kane for 6 weeks," Luke said, "since the first supplemental filing. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to involve you in the process, but what we have," he paused. "Emily, Victor Kane has been manipulating federal procurement data for 4 years. Not aggressively, carefully, quietly, the way he does everything. Small adjustments in performance metrics. Strategic omissions in compliance reporting. Nothing that screamed fraud on its own, but everything that adds up to it across 4 years of contracts." He paused again. "We have documentation. My attorney has been preparing it for submission to the review board's oversight committee." Emily processed this. "You've been building a counter case this whole time." "I've been defending myself," Luke said, "the way I know how to." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to feel like you were part of an operation," he said. "You came into this to help. You weren't supposed to be a soldier." Emily pressed her hand flat against the kitchen table. She thought about her father, who had been a soldier, who had known the difference between fighting for yourself and fighting for something bigger, who had written lists on paper because some things needed to be seen in your own handwriting. "Submit the documentation Monday morning," she said. "And Luke?" "Yes. Don't ever keep something from me to protect me again," she said. "I don't need protection. I need the truth." A long pause, longer than any of his previous silences. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing and fix it," she said. "Already in progress," he said. And then quietly, in the voice she had come to recognize as the one without performance, the one that lived underneath all the composure and control, "Emily, what he did to your father's name—" "I know," she said. "I'm going to make it right." She believed that too. She believed it with the same immediate evidence, free certainty that had been settling into her life over the past 2 weeks, rearranging things without her permission, building something she hadn't planned for and couldn't quite name yet. "I know you are," she said. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." She hung up. She sat at her kitchen table. She looked at the ring on her finger, the ring she had stopped thinking about as an artifact of a mistake and started thinking about as just a thing that was there, the way familiar things are there, quietly and without announcement. She did not sleep well, not because she was afraid, but because she was thinking about the space between what she had agreed to and what was actually happening, the distance between a transaction and something else entirely, the particular moment when a door that has been considering giving finally does. She thought about what she had said to Carol Weston. "Ask me in 6 months." She thought about the fact that she wasn't sure she needed 6 months anymore. And outside Chicago moved on in the dark, enormous and indifferent as ever, while inside a small apartment in Wicker Park, a woman who had spent 3 years making herself smaller sat at a kitchen table with a gold band on her finger, and the slow, certain knowledge that she was not going to be small anymore. Not for Victor Kane, not for Marcus Cole, not for anyone who had ever looked at her and seen a limitation instead of a choice. She was Emily Walker, daughter of a SEAL, trained nurse, the woman who stayed, and she was just getting started. Luke's attorney submitted the documentation to the review board's oversight committee at 8:52 in the morning. 47 pages, 4 years of manipulated procurement data, strategic omissions, falsified compliance metrics, all of it assembled with the quiet, methodical precision of someone who had been patient long enough and was done being patient. Luke called Emily the moment it was filed. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. "It's done," he said. "How long before they respond?" she asked. "Hours, maybe less." A pause. "Victor is going to know within the hour that it was filed. He has someone inside the committee office. He always has someone inside." And when he knows he's going to move, Luke said, whatever he has left, he's going to use it. This is the part where cornered people do the most damage. Emily was standing in the Mercy General stairwell, which had become over the past 5 weeks a kind of field command post for her life outside nursing. She pressed her back against the wall and thought about that cornered people and the damage they do, and thought about her father, who had taught her that the most dangerous moment in any confrontation is not the beginning and not the end, but the middle, when one side realizes it's losing and decides it has nothing left to lose. "I'll be at work until 4, she said. "After that, wherever you need me." "I need you safe," Luke said. "That's all." "That's not all," she said, "and you know it." A beat of his particular silence. "You're right," he said. "I need you. Period." She absorbed that. She had gotten better at absorbing the things Luke said without performing a reaction, without either dismissing them or letting them show on her face in the middle of a hospital hallway. She filed it somewhere internal, somewhere she would deal with later when there was time for the full weight of it. "Call me when Victor moves," she said. "I mean it. First call." "First call," he said. "I promise." She went back to her patients. Victor moved at 11:47. Luke called at 11:50. She was in the middle of a chart review, and she stepped into the hallway and answered without checking who it was because she already knew. "He held a press conference," Luke said. Emily stopped walking. A press conference. "He preempted the oversight committee, went straight to the media." Luke's voice had that quality she had heard once before, the compressed, controlled fury of a man holding something that wanted to detonate. He admitted to discrepancies in his reporting, framed it as an internal accounting error that his own team identified and self-reported, positioned himself as the transparent, accountable alternative to, and I'm quoting directly, a CEO whose personal instability and pattern of impulsive decision-making make him a liability to national security. The silence that followed was the kind Emily needed a moment to navigate. "He confessed to fraud," she said slowly, "and turned it into a character attack on you." "In front of 12 cameras and a room full of reporters," Luke said. "Yes." "That's," she searched for the word, "audacious." "It's Victor Kane," Luke said. "Audacity is his primary tool." Emily leaned against the wall. She was thinking, not reacting. Thinking, which was the thing she did when the situation required the clearest version of herself, the version that didn't get distracted by emotion even when emotion was entirely justified. "The Oversight Committee has 47 pages, she said. "Victor has a press conference. Those are not equal weapons." "No," Luke said, "but the press conference hits first. By the time the committee's findings circulate, the initial story is already written. And the initial story is that Luke Harrison's judgment is compromised by business decisions, by a hasty marriage, by a wife who—" He stopped. "By a wife who what?" Emily said. "He named you," Luke said quietly, "in the press conference. He said, and I need you to hear this from me before you see the clip. He said that my decision to marry a woman I met hours earlier, a woman whose only qualification is proximity to a SEAL legacy she didn't earn, suggests a pattern of chasing credibility through association rather than building it through integrity." Emily heard every word. She heard them individually and in sequence, and she let them land, all of them, without flinching. Her father's legacy, reduced to a qualification she didn't earn. Something in her chest went very quiet and very clear, the way things go quiet and clear in the moment before a decision that can't be undone. "I'll call you back," she said. "Emily." 10 minutes, she said. "I'll call you back." She hung up. She stood in the hallway for 30 seconds. Then she walked to the nurse's station and found Priya, who took one look at Emily's face and said nothing, which was exactly correct. "Cover my next hour," Emily said. "Done," Priya said immediately without asking why, because Priya had been watching Emily Walker for 5 weeks and understood something about the particular expression currently on her face. "What are you going to do?" "Something I should have done a long time ago," Emily said. She called Carol Weston. Carol answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said, which meant she had already seen the press conference, which meant Emily had less time than she thought. "I need 30 minutes, Emily said. "On the record, no preparation, no management, no one else in the room, just you and me and a recorder." "When?" Carol said. "Now," Emily said. "By phone if we have to." A pause. "Give me 5 minutes to get set up." Emily called Luke back. I'm doing a phone interview with Carol Weston, she said. Right now, before you say anything, this is my call, my decision, my voice. I am not a variable in your contract negotiation. I am a person who has been named in a public statement, and I am going to respond to that statement as a person. Not as your wife, not as a chess piece, as Emily Walker. The silence that followed was the longest one he had ever given her. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. No argument, no qualification, no tactical concern. Just the word given fully the way you give something when you've decided to trust someone completely. Thank you, she said. You don't need my permission, he said quietly. Moeko, she said, but I wanted you to know. She called Carol back at 12:03. She talked for 28 minutes. She talked about her father, not the seal, not the legacy, not the credential, the man. James Walker, who had made her lunch every morning until he deployed, who had called her from overseas on her birthday every single year, without exception, who had taught her to drive in a parking lot on a Sunday and told her that the most important skill anyone could have was knowing when to stop and when to keep going. The man who had sat at a kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon and been found by his 15-year-old daughter, and who had never in 22 years of service, in 15 years of fatherhood, been anything other than someone who stayed. She talked about nursing, about the 17 rejections, about the patients who asked for her by name, about Raymond Holt and his handwritten letter and the 3 paragraphs that had put her on a kitchen floor for 4 minutes. She talked about Luke. She didn't talk about the contract or the review board or Victor Kane. She talked about a man who had answered a question with honesty when lying would have been easier, who had said, I failed it on day 3 without defending it, who had looked at a 7-year-old girl named Maya with an expression that didn't know anyone was watching. Mr. Kane said, I don't have qualifications, Emily said near the end. He's right that I don't have his kind of qualifications. I don't have a boardroom. I don't have federal contracts. I don't have a team of people whose job it is to make me look like something I'm not. She paused. What I have is 16 years of getting up every morning and doing the work that needs doing. I have patients who are alive because someone paid attention. I have a father whose name I will not allow to be used as ammunition by a man who has spent 4 years falsifying the data that is supposed to keep this country safe. Another pause. And I have a husband who told me the truth before he had any reason to and kept telling it even when it cost him something. That's not instability. That's integrity. And some people have a very hard time recognizing integrity because they've spent so long without it. Carol Weston was quiet for 3 seconds after Emily finished. Then she said, That'll run in an hour. Emily thanked her and hung up and sat in the supply closet, not the stairwell. She needed somewhere with a door that closed and breathed for 2 full minutes. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the particular physical aftermath of saying true things out loud that you have been carrying inside for a very long time. Her phone rang. She looked at it. It was not Luke. It was a number she didn't recognize with an Illinois area code. She answered. Is this Emily Walker? A woman's voice. Professional, careful. Yes, Emily said. My name is Patricia Okafor. I'm the Deputy Director of the Federal Contract Review Board. A pause. I apologize for the direct call. I obtained your number through your husband's attorney with his consent. I want to be clear that this is not an official contact. This is personal. I heard your interview with Carol Weston approximately 40 minutes ago. Emily went very still. The interview hasn't published yet. Carol Weston and I have known each other for 20 years, Patricia Okafor said. She shared the recording as a professional courtesy. Another pause. Ms. Walker, Mrs. Harrison, I want you to know that the Oversight Committee received Harrington Defense's documentation this morning and has been in session since 10:30. What I can tell you without compromising the process is that the documentation is extensive, credible, and has been received with serious attention. Her voice was measured formal, and underneath the formality was something human. I also want you to know that what you said about your father, I knew James Walker. Not personally, but by reputation, the way you know people in this world. He was a good man. What Victor Kane said was wrong. And I wanted someone to tell you that directly, woman to woman, before the official process gets loud. Emily's throat tightened. Thank you, she said. That means thank you. The process will take the time it takes, Patricia Okafor said. But I think you'll find that truth, when it has 47 pages behind it, tends to move faster than people expect. A brief pause. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Harrison. She hung up. Emily sat in the supply closet with her phone in her hands and her father's name somewhere in her chest, held carefully, held with both hands the way you hold something irreplaceable. She finished her shift. She saw her patients. She was present and focused and entirely herself, which was the only version of herself she intended to be from this point forward. At 4:15, Priya found her at the medication cart and stood beside her without saying anything for a moment. Then she said, "Carol Weston's piece is live." Emily nodded. "I know. It's everywhere," Priya said quietly. "I mean everywhere. It's been shared 50,000 times in the last hour." Emily kept counting medications. "Okay." "Emily," Priya put her hand on Emily's arm. "It's good. It's really genuinely good. People are—" She stopped, started again. "People are responding to you the way you respond to patients. Like you're real. Like you're someone they recognize." Emily stopped counting. She looked at Priya, at her friend, who had dragged her to a charity gala in a navy dress and changed the entire trajectory of her life, and felt the full weight of the last 5 weeks land somewhere in her body all at once. "Come here," Priya said, and pulled her into a hug that was brief and fierce and entirely sufficient. "Don't," Emily said into her shoulder. "Too late," Priya said. "Already happening." Emily laughed, which turned into something that was almost crying, which she shut down with the same clinical determination she applied to everything else, and pulled back and breathed and picked up her chart. "I have 2 more patients," she said. "Of course you do," Priya said, and smiled like a woman who had known all along exactly how this was going to go. Luke was outside the clinic at 4:59, not in the town car, in a plain black SUV parked across the street sitting in the driver's seat. Emily stopped walking when she saw it. She crossed the street. She got in. He looked at her, she looked at him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that comes from one bad night, the kind that comes from weeks of controlled vigilance, finally releasing its hold the way a fist unclenches after holding on too long. He looked for the first time since she had known him like someone who was allowed to be tired. "The Oversight Committee issued a preliminary finding at 4:30, he said. "Victor Kane's contracts are under formal investigation. The supplemental filings against Harrington have been dismissed. The primary review resumes without them." He paused. "We're still in the running." Emily exhaled. "And," she said, because there was always an "and" with Luke. She had learned to wait for it. "And Victor's 2 board contacts have retained separate attorneys," Luke said, "as of this afternoon." He looked at his hands on the steering wheel. "It's not over. These things are never clean at the end. But the trajectory has changed." "It changed because of 47 pages, Emily said. "It changed," Luke said quietly, "because of a lot of things." He looked at her. "I heard the interview." "I know," she said. "What you said about your father." "I meant it," she said. "I know you did." He held her gaze and she held his, and the distance between them, which had been measured and managed and carefully maintained for 5 weeks, was smaller than it had ever been. "Emily, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you tell me not to." She felt her pulse in her throat. "Okay. When I sat down at that table 5 weeks ago with a marriage certificate and a plan for how to manage the situation, I thought I knew what I was doing," he said. "I have spent my entire adult life managing situations. I am very good at it. I know how to assess variables, control outcomes, minimize exposure." He paused. "I did not know how to account for you." She said nothing. She let him finish. "You are not a variable," he said. "You are the most stubbornly, specifically real person I have ever met. You walked into a situation that had nothing to do with you, and you didn't perform a single thing. Not at the dinner, not at the fundraiser, not in that interview. You were just you, and that is the most disarming thing I have ever encountered in my life, which is saying something, because I have encountered a significant number of disarming things." His voice was steady, but she could hear the thing underneath it, the thing he was choosing to let surface for the first time. "I don't want an annulment." The words sat between them, clean and irreversible and true. "Luke, I know the agreement," he said. "I know what we said. I know you have your life and your work and your apartment in Wicker Park, and I know none of this was in your plan. I'm not asking you to change your life. He stopped, started again. I'm telling you the truth. The way you asked me to from the beginning. This is me telling you the truth. Emily looked at him for a long time. She thought about the paper list on her kitchen table, the reasons on the right side that she had never quite been able to name. She thought about Carol Weston's question. She thought about what she had told herself in the car that first morning, that careful note about not being able to think clearly if he said certain things. She thought about Raymond Holt's 51 years and figuring it out being part of it. She thought about the fact that she had stopped thinking of the ring as an artifact 2 weeks ago and had not let herself examine what that meant. She had the evidence now. She had been collecting it for 5 weeks without admitting that was what she was doing because she was a woman who needed evidence, who needed the careful accumulation of proof before she would allow anything to be true. She had the evidence. She had enough. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Luke looked at her. I'm not going anywhere, she said again steadier. I don't want the annulment either. And I have wanted to say that for at least 2 weeks, and I kept stopping myself because I thought I needed more time and more evidence and more certainty. She looked at him directly the way she had learned to look at things she wasn't afraid of anymore. I don't need more time. I know who you are. I've watched you be that person under the worst possible conditions, and I know who you are. She paused. Ask me again if I love you. Something moved through his face. The composure, the control, the carefully maintained steadiness, all of it shifted, not collapsed, but opened, the way a window opens, letting something in that had been outside for a long time. Do you love me? He said. I'm working on it, she said, but I am very close. He laughed. It was the most unguarded sound she had ever heard from him, real and sudden and genuine, the kind of laugh that doesn't ask permission. She had heard him smile in his voice before. She had not heard this. It was better. That is the most Emily Walker answer possible, he said. You're going to have to get used to those, she said. I am very willing to do that, he said. She reached across and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers with the same quality she had come to know from his hand at the small of her back, not claiming, not performing. Just there, steady, present, the way the best things are present without announcement or condition. They sat like that for a moment in the plain black SUV across from Mercy General Clinic, while Chicago moved around them in every direction, enormous and indifferent and completely unaware that two people had just decided without ceremony or spectacle to stop managing something and start building it instead. What happens now, Emily said. The review continues for another 2 weeks, Luke said. Victor's investigation will take months. There will be noise. There will be more press. There will probably be more dinners with people I don't entirely trust. He paused. And at some point when all of that is done, I would very much like to take you somewhere that has nothing to do with contracts or review boards or any of this, somewhere quiet where the only agenda is figuring out what the next part of our lives looks like. He looked at her. Together. I have a leaky faucet, she said. I know, he said. I'm keeping my job, she said. I wouldn't have it any other way, he said. And I'm keeping Priya, she said. She comes with the package. Priya is a gift, Luke said seriously. She got you to that gala. Emily looked down at their joined hands, at the ring that had once felt like the most disorienting object in the world and now felt like the beginning of something she hadn't known to want. She thought about the nurse who had stayed in a waiting room 16 years ago, about the person she had become because of that, about the specific and particular life that had led her to a corner of a ballroom on a Friday night where a man she didn't know had spilled no, where she had spilled water on a man she didn't know and laughed in a room full of people who were performing the best versions of themselves and felt for the first time in years like the truest version of herself. You never know which ordinary evening is the one that changes everything. You can't see it from the outside. You can't plan for it on a paper list. You just show up in the dress you bought for a graduation and never wore again, and you spill water on a stranger and you laugh. And then one ordinary Tuesday at a time, you build a life. 3 weeks later, the Harrington defense contract was awarded, $812 million. The announcement ran in every major financial publication in the country. Luke's name was in the headline. Emily's name was in the third paragraph in a sentence that described her simply as his wife, a nurse from a North Side Chicago clinic who had, according to multiple sources, been exactly that from the first night. Emily read it on her phone in the break room at Mercy General, between patients with a cup of coffee that had gone slightly cold. Priya looked over her shoulder and read it too. Then she said, third paragraph, respectable. I thought so, Emily said. Dr. Marcus Cole passed the break room door, glanced in, and for the first time in 3 years said absolutely nothing to Emily Walker. He kept walking. Emily watched him go and felt not triumph, not satisfaction, not the particular complicated joy of a long-delayed justice. Just the clean, uncomplicated absence of weight. The feeling of having put something down that you had been carrying so long you had forgotten it wasn't part of you. She finished her coffee. She picked up her chart. She went back to her patients the way she always did, the way she had always done, steady, present, paying attention to the things that mattered. Emily Walker had spent 3 years making herself invisible in rooms that didn't deserve her presence. She had spent her whole life being told in 100 different ways and by 100 different people what she was worth and where she belonged and how small she was supposed to stay. She was done being small. She was a daughter of a SEAL and a trained nurse and a woman who had walked into the most disorienting 5 weeks of her life and come out the other side, not diminished, but clarified, refined down to her most essential self, the self that had always been there waiting for the moment when she decided to stop apologizing for it. She was Emily Walker Harrison. She stayed, she showed up, she told the truth, and she was, for the first time in a very long time, exactly where she was supposed to be.